Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the TCLF One-on-One Series. Through the One-on-One Series, we aim to interact with the best legal professionals from India and around the world. Well, today's episode is certainly special because it comes without any specialized theme as such. We'll be talking about multiple topics such as generalization versus specialization in law. What should any lawyer keep in mind while launching his or her own practice or firm? Uh, some talk about gaming laws in India. And to discuss all this and much more, we have a very special individual. And personally speaking, from his LinkedIn posts and conversations, I think one of the smartest and the wittiest person I've seen, Mr. Abhishek Subbaiah. Sir is currently the managing partner at Bridge Legal, which is a boutique law firm based out of Bangalore. Previously, he has worked with some of the top law firms in the country, such as JSA, Cyril Amachan Mangaldas, Khaitan and Co. He also has the experience of working with the in-house legal team of the ICICI Bank. So he is a man who has worked with different organizational structures. And sir, it's completely an honor to have you here today.
The honor's mine, and you pronounce my surname perfectly well, by the way. Congratulations. Good to be here.
Um, I'm glad. I'm glad, sir. So, I, from the very first question, I would like to, take you back to your law school days and come up with a question which relatives and younger siblings and all of these people ask: why law? What was it about the profession, the legal profession as such, which attracted you, and why did you pick law as a career?
It's a it's a combination of different things. It's strange. So my priorities changed over the course of time. So initially, I wanted to get into it because I could, do good. That extremely ideal situation that everyone has in their minds to say that you can actually influence policy and law and all of that. And through the course of law school, of course, that changes. You start needing a little money, and now it's come full circle. So uh, it started off as being a social service in a sense, and now we're slowly getting into policy again. So I think we've just come full circle. It's been nice though to get training in the corporate framework as well. A lot of our clients are also corporate, so that's the biggest reason. There's nothing more to it. I think it's you can't think about it too much. I think most of our career choices don't really happen out of a lot of thought. Maybe there are a few people who do that, but this just happened. That's the best way to put it. It wasn't too much thinking or planning into it. I didn't want to do engineering. If that's I mean that's one thing I didn't want to do. So this was a good alternative in a sense. Yeah.
And I also believe that for any person who's interested in policy and
Yeah.
influencing decisions, I think the legal profession
Yeah.
provides a certain skill set which no other profession can provide, because you're looking at multiple areas at one point of time. And like, what's your
Yeah.
opinion on that?
You're absolutely right. So you can do it in many ways. You don't, and there was a recent post that I did on this as well to say that most corporate lawyers are also contributing to the economy and society in many ways. And by the way, a lot of lawyers also work with a lot of startups. So that's insane, right? Because you're also working with a lot of companies that want to better the way you live your life in a sense.
Right.
It could be anything. I mean, even when Paytm was a startup, I mean, look at how it's influenced your day-to-day transactions, for example. So there are different ways to do it. You can still contribute to society without, saying that you're not doing anything good per se. So there are many ways to do it, and I agree with you. It's a good thing and a bad thing because you're neither here nor there unless you start specializing in something. But you're absolutely right. It's a wonderful base. You can do so many things out of law school, and even after your career takes off, you can just branch out into so many different things. So it's very versatile. That's for sure.
Right. And like, just coming back to that post, because I think I've read that post, like, what is your opinion on, this perception that people have that only litigating lawyers, are real lawyers? You talk to, the more elderly people, and even, the younger lot these days, they think that, corporate lawyers are just earning money. They're not contributing anything to the society and things like that. What do you think about this perception that has, come about?
Those people either haven't worked in the corporate framework, so they don't know what they're talking about in terms of how hard it is, what kind of clients you're working with. Even if you're working with very large law firms, they're large because they also have large clients. So if you're helping out, the Adanis or the ICICI banks of the world, you're helping out the economy in such a large way. Uh,
Right.
it's it's hard to say that you just have to go and litigate and wear a black coat and go ahead and do that. And the ironic part is that almost all senior counsel and litigators get briefed by corporate counsel in between, almost all of them, right? Unless they're working
Correct.
directly with clients. So I think it's a very hate based. I don't say that in the most serious sense. It's just it gets a lot of hate unnecessarily. There's also it's also my college, right? So it's the biggest target for a lot of people to say that, oh, this is what's wrong with what's going on. I can tell you, and I saw one of the responses as well to that, to say that the way they're teaching you is wrong. They're putting corporate jobs on a platter. Absolutely not. You have complete choice and freedom. I think with my batch, I think about 40 sat for placement, so that's about half the entire batch. What does that tell you? 40 sat for placements,
Right.
right? What did the other 40 do? They either got into policy, or even if they went abroad, that's fine, right? They're still they're still repatriating quite a bit here. So
Right.
there's just so many ways to go about it. I think it's very unfair to target people for their choices. And it's not greed, I can tell you that much. A lot of times, if you're getting a good pay package, it's not greed. It's maybe you're the sole breadwinner of the family, for example, right?
Right.
So many different ways to do it. And I can tell you, with my batch at least, because that's who I had the most contact with, most of us were from the middle class, or lower or upper middle class. We weren't so well to do. We definitely wanted a better life. There were those, of course, who came from other backgrounds. They're also doing really well for themselves. So I think there's nothing wrong with that. You can't influence that choice. The biggest question to ask is, why aren't people litigating then, right? So
Right. And like
yeah,
even apart from these financial reasons, that maybe I want a better paycheck,
yeah,
I want a better salary, like there's nothing wrong with that. I would
yeah,
obviously, as an individual, want the best life for myself. uh, but like
yeah.
even apart from that, let's say even if I want to become a litigating counsel, it can be my choice that I join the disputes team of a large law firm, just to get that environment, just to know how the bigger corporations work, how these disputes come about, and how to handle that pressure. Because as a litigating counsel, I would want to argue these matters. So I think
Yeah,
that's
no, you're
the
absolutely
reason
right. Yeah,
as well.
yeah,
Yeah. So like
yeah.
coming back to
No,
your
you're absolutely
college.
right. So
Yeah.
yeah, sorry,
I,
my bad.
I would also
Please.
like to, ask about your law school experience. How was it like? What were your expectations, and all of that?
That's changed a lot. So when I was in law school, I had a particular opinion of it. When I graduated, I had another opinion. Midway through, I had another opinion when I started meeting people from my college. And now it's a bit different, right? So it's constantly changed. But I can tell you one thing. Okay, so I can, even if there's been criticism, it's been constructive criticism. So I've thought about a lot of issues with my alma mater, and but it's not in a overtly critical way. It's always trying to figure out, okay, how could that be fixed. But all in all, now that I've come, what, it's been close to a decade now. It's been 15 years since I stepped on those grounds. So I'd say it was great. I mean, I wouldn't say that there was anything wrong with it. It gave a lot of freedom. There was a lot of scope to do what you wanted to do. uh, there's good and bad everywhere, but it was a good experience. I can't say anything wrong about it. It was good. Yeah.
Correct. And like talking about your experience now, as I mentioned, you work with larger law firms. You've also worked with the in-house legal team of a one of the largest banks in India, and now you have your own boutique firm. So, how do you compare the organizational structures and cultures of these three places? What are the differences? What is the difference in the kind of work these places do?
Oh, and it's I've thought about this. I think I've had 10 desks in my career, if you think about the current work from home desks as well. So it's even within an organization, if you're in a particular city as opposed to another, there's a culture change right there. So you can't even paint one firm with one brush. So it depends on who you work for. Sorry, work with. That should be the ideal situation. Doesn't always happen, but depends on where you're working, depends on what practice area you're in. a lot of that. So it's been very different. So whether it's banking, finance, or tech, or the larger TMT sectors, they're all been very different in terms of work culture. The broad idea is that I think in almost any place you will find people who share your philosophy. I don't think there's ever been a situation where you go to a place or an organization, because these organizations are large, right? Unless it's a very small firm, you will find what you're looking for in terms of resonance of what you want to do, how you want to do it. So uh, were they different? Absolutely. Like every single desk is different, but uh, largely everyone's coming to work. So that's really the end goal, and it depends on who your clients are and who you're working with. Essentially, that's about it. So again, a very very broad spectrum. Yeah.
Right. And like, what was the time that you had this inspiration that now it is the time to launch my own practice, launch my own boutique practice and boutique firm? What inspired you to do so, and what was the vision, and what is the vision for Bridge Legal going forward?
Very simply, it wasn't a plan I had even, let's say, 2 years ago. It wasn't supposed to have been done this early, but you know what they say in terms of necessity being the mother of invention there. So I wanted to work out of Bangalore. I felt Bombay was it didn't give me the flexibility to have certain cost rates just because of how expensive the city is to be based out of, right? At the same time, I felt that Bangalore has and have various people and founders and companies that aren't really tapped yet. So there was an entire untapped resource to be found there as well. So that, in combination with the fact that I wanted to get into a lot of areas that traditional firms didn't start doing yet, right? So whether it's a esports company or whether it's even I sent crypto mails out back in 2013, by the way. They just weren't responded to. No one really cared, right? So a lot of what I wanted to do was, being literally ahead of the curve, like actually ahead of the curve, to say that, before people even start doing this, let me start doing this because I feel that there's a market there. So that's really the reason. I didn't find uh, any place or any firm or any company that wanted to do the things I wanted to do back then. And even now we're doing crazy things that in a traditional framework you wouldn't have had the time or the resources to do, essentially. So that's really it, just the freedom to go ahead and do what you want to do, essentially.
Correct.
That
And
was about
like,
it. And also cost structures. Yeah, cost structures as well. That's a big deal. Yeah.
from your posts and from your previous podcast, Bridge Legal has its own podcast, which is fantastic, by the way. And I would also paste the link of that podcast for all our viewers to check out. I think it's a wonderful podcast. And from your posts as well, sir, I've seen that you're interested in fintech, you're interested in working with cryptocurrency. You've recently drafted a contract relating to NFTs and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you're working with these startups which are working on these revolutionary things, because almost everybody is interested in investing, but they don't know how to do that, and they're just following the
Yeah.
herd right now. But you're working with these
Yeah.
startups. So I want to talk about that experience. How is it working, like with these startups, with these young inventors and young businessmen, entrepreneurs? uh, what are the challenges, and what are the things that you keep in mind as a lawyer when you're working with these startups?
So first off, they're not all young, by the way. So I think it goes all the way from 28 to, I think there's another gentleman who's about 52. So they're not all young per se, but they have the spirit. So I get what you were going for in terms of just having that passion to innovate. Essentially, it is absolutely fantastic because, especially if you have, this is the strange part. So it's really weird to be in a very large firm that's been around for 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and then try to advise a startup with going ahead with a suit and tie and try and figure that stuff out. But uh, founder to founder now, when you have your own business, the conversations are very very different, right? It's a lot more casual. It's not as uptight. uh, I think there's a time and place to be uptight. There's a time and place to wear a suit and tie in a particular situation. There's a time and place to just have a conversation. So uh, It is absolutely fantastic, especially because we choose the clients we work with. We've said no to about 4 to 5 different clients, right? Just because either we feel, someone else can do this for you. You don't really need us. We only step in if you want something specialized. So makes no sense if you're just coming to us to, for arbitrage, right? Cost arbitrage. That happens a lot where they just try to go to another firm and say that, can you give us a lower quote essentially? And we just say, we can't do that. So it is absolutely fantastic. The people I work with is, and even with the team, right? We have, WhatsApp groups, so we have conversations there. Of course, emails are, protocol, but it's very, very organic. We have those conversations, and it's just absolutely fantastic. And by the way, not all the work we do is for startups. Sometimes we just do it on our
Right.
own. The NFT project, for example, is something that we just did on our own. We didn't get paid for it. We
Right.
just did it as, R&D for ourselves. And even there, we're going to put that as open source, templates in about a month after the cool off of, the transaction that we did. But yeah, so that's how we're doing stuff. So we're doing stuff that most people aren't doing yet in terms of
Right.
just, contributing to the ecosystem.
And talking about the creation of a niche, you've just mentioned, creating this template and working with fintech startups or cryptocurrency or matters of gaming law. Uh, so, in your opinion, how important is it, to create a niche in today's times as far as the legal profession is concerned? And what I'm talking about is, the larger debate or the broader debate about generalization versus specialization. Is it important, in your opinion, in today's time to have a specialized field of law wherein you can say that, this is what I want to focus at?
It really depends where you fit into an organization. So if you'd be, someone who's working with about 3 to 4 years of experience, I would assume that you'd be specialized in something, right? Because you're not at a level yet where you can generalize and specialize. So let's just put it this way: anyone who focuses on generalization, and even in-house counsel, right? Because they're the biggest proponents of this, they're usually very senior, so they've already specialized, right? So the best example I can give of this, and I keep making this analogy, is it's like a map with a magnifying glass. You don't want to magnify too much, but you also want to be able to, take a step back, look at the entire map, and then zoom in again, right? So it's like a zoom in, zoom out situation, but you should be able to zoom in, because if you can't do that, then what are you giving advice on? All you're doing is just being a middleman between, business and counsel. And there are a few that way, but the majority, are specialized in their own field. So even if you find an in-house lawyer who says that, he or she is a generalist, they're also usually specialized with that business's, metrics. So for example, if Cisco, that's another place where I worked, right? So they need to know their licensing laws inside out, for example, right? Because most of what they do is SaaS based, and they know that inside out. At the same time, are they going to also give opinions on employment law and, a lot of the other, 360-degree stuff that happens? Absolutely, right? You need to be able to do that, right? It's really, really hard. So that's where it gets really hard. So with what we are trying to do, to say that, we're doing fintech, gaming, we're doing, to a huge extent, even crypto, blockchain, it's very hard to follow all metrics. Let me tell you that very clearly, because you need to follow regulators and laws from almost 4 to 5 different areas of law. So it's hard. Can it be done? Absolutely. Does it need to be done? Not necessarily. If you want to be, one of the rock stars in one of your firms, then yeah, you need to know it for sure. To say that you can hop between a lot of these and zoom in, zoom out again, right?
Right.
But you can function as a specialist, by the way. I know people who've been doing one kind of, deal for like 15 years. They're very successful.
Right.
I won't hold it against them. They're very, very good at what they do. Debt capital markets, for example. Anyone who's in debt capital markets knows their stuff inside out in terms of,
Right.
forms and filings and all of that stuff. And they do good work. They're
Right.
extremely specialized. They probably get paid more than a lot of us. So, yeah, different strokes, different folks. Yeah.
Uh, I'm quite relating to it because and all of these questions are out of curiosity, and I'm sorry if I'm going into a lot of nitty-gritties here. Of I just want to understand how managing partners or a person who has started his own practice, how the strategy and the mind works. So I'm just going to delve more into that. So I've seen that some of the newer practices, they get into this self promotion tactics or self advertising tactics that We can do this, we
Yeah,
can do that. Now we'll be nominated for this award and
yeah,
that,
yeah.
and all that. But and not
Yeah.
uh, n- no offense to all these firms, but comparing it to the approach of Bridge Legal, till now what I've seen is there's a podcast which anyone can listen to. There's no call fee that I have to give, anything like that. You just release a fantastic red liner on the Karnataka Police Amendment Act. That was fantastic. Again, you have launched a game wherein even students can participate and send in their entries, and get an opportunity to learn on gaming laws. So what I'm seeing is there is a constant value creation. There is a a hunger or a drive I can see to create value and to instigate people to focus on these areas which are very relevant in today's time with all these growing technologies. So how
Yeah.
did this approach come about, and why was there no focus on self promotion or self advertising? Because it can be very tempting. I'm sure it must be very tempting sometimes for some individuals. So how did this come about?
It's just a question of different approaches, I suppose. So you're right in saying no offense to these guys who do that, right? So if you've got a large organization, you want to be, published in some report somewhere, and you have a lot of foreign clients, and foreign clients only look at those rankings and everything else. I think that's fine. I mean,
Right.
and honestly, the only reason I've stayed away, the reason we've stayed away from it is because almost every award that people come to us is, first of all, it's really strange because they started coming to us even before we started actually working. The second thing is, there's usually a fee and there's a lot of that nonsense. So I don't like that. I don't like the concept of having to pay micro pay for stuff. So even on the website there are no ads.
Right.
There's no ads on the podcast as well. There's no advertising anywhere. I think even with some of the posts, I try to refrain from tagging the company, the firm page as well, wherever possible, unless it's actually tied to that. So it's just a different philosophy. I don't know whether it's very sustainable, but even with the council I work with, I tell them to focus on managing their own personal brand. They're very good friends of mine, right? So
Right.
close to about the same age on all sides. So uh, we just putting the lawyer back in lawyer. It's like
Yeah.
firms tend to create their own brand image. For us, Bridge Legal is just a vehicle. At the end of the day, it's still the lawyers who are working, right?
Right.
So that's just the approach. Is it tempting? Of course it is. It's very tempting to promote and do all of that. But I'm telling you, so the way we function, we don't want more work. We don't want too many people coming to us because then it's going to sacrifice the work we're doing for our existing clients. We want to function as a true boutique. We just want a few clients that we can give 100% of our attention to, give really good work to them. And for some of the stuff that changes the market, so if we want the NFT 2.0 that we want to work on, we also want to circulate it. So we want to set standards to say that, listen, we're going to give back to the community there. Um, Templates are not a big deal. Seriously, templates need to stop being these, treasure troves, right? Does it take a lot of effort to
10,000,
make an actual
15,000.
template?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it does. It takes a lot of effort. The NFT one, for example, it's essentially like drafting from scratch, right? So
Right.
it does take effort, but we hope the good karma comes back to us, in a sense. We're not trying to chase money. We're hoping the money comes the other way around, essentially. We want to focus on the product and the service rather than focus on the sales, essentially.
I certainly believe in that approach, and I'm sure it's gonna pay back because, uh, at least from a third party perspective, I can see that value creation happening. And coming back to, you raised a very interesting point here that we want the right clients. We don't want more clientele or more work, unnecessary work, just to say that we have a volume. We want the right amount
Yeah,
of work, the right kind of work. So and I'm sure young
yeah.
practitioners would also have these questions in mind. How do you identify these clients? How do you make that difference that this is the kind of work that I would like to take on, and this is something that I wouldn't like to take on, especially when I've launched my own practice.
Yeah, see, you're going to get your fingers burned at some point of time or the other. Let's just be very clear on that. No amount of advice that anyone gives is going to see to it that you defend yourself from not falling into those traps. And let me get to what those are. I've what it was about 8 years of work that I did with different large organizations with a lot of clients that were very happy with the kind of work that I did on a very personal level. Uh, so how many of those clients are clients of Bridge Legal now? Zero, right? So you have to ask yourself the question: how does that work? So when you're creating relationships with people, are they just following the herd and just going to a large firm, or are they doing that because of you, right? Or if there's some level of stickiness or retention to say that they want to stick with who their existing lawyers are or the law firms are, then that's for them. But if you come across clients who value you as counsel, true counsel, I'm not talking
Right.
about a lawyer you send a mail to and you ask for a response in a particular tag. That's not the way you look at things. So you want to be looking at you know clients who first of all value you as an individual. This comes back to my earlier point, right? Putting the
Right.
lawyer back in law firm, right?
Right.
It's just a it's just lawyers coming together, which is why I love the JSA framework, by the way. Of all the firms that I've worked in, that was the best epitome of the hybrid function of chambers and law firm. So guaranteed paycheck plus bill
Right.
share plus the ability to chase clients and get that stuff done, plus a culture that's modern. It's not traditional in terms of a family owned situation. So it depends on what you want. There are certain people who are perfectly okay with a traditional situation. They're okay with that. And by the way, not everyone goes and sets up their own practice, so there's nothing
Right.
wrong with being
Right.
a partner in any one of the large firms. So it just depends on what you want to do, what your risk appetite's like. Are you being hindered in a particular way in terms of what work you can do in a particular firm? I felt that for certain, especially because uh, finance and banking is such a conventional situation that it just puts you into that slot. And
Right.
most fintech lawyers today are actually technology lawyers who are getting into finance, not the other way around. Very,
Right.
very rarely is it the other way around, right? Uh, so yeah, it can be limiting sometimes. It depends on what you want to do. Seriously.
Right.
So there are so many options, so many places you can go to. You like the JSA framework, that's awesome. You like a CAM type framework, that's brilliant. You
Right.
like a boutique framework, that's great. It just depends on what you want. Just figuring out what you want is really important.
Correct. Uh, I'm just
Yeah.
going to, divert this conversation a bit to, gaming laws because I wanted to have this conversation and I might as well, take this
Right.
opportunity. Because
Yeah.
it's a very fascinating, these developments that have been happening around a few days. So we have seen in Karnataka, and as I mentioned, you have created a red liner on that, highlighting these changes, the Karnataka Police Amendment Act. And today we are seeing that corporations like Dream 11, they're stopping their operations in Bangalore. They're moving out. They're
Yeah.
saying that
Yeah.
we're raising our hands. We don't want to, get in trouble here. So,
Yeah.
and we've seen not only Karnataka, many states across India having, this, uh, I, I think it's a regressive attitude and, hostile attitude towards this online gaming industry. And they don't realize the kind of potential this industry has, the kind of investment it can bring into these places, and the kind of startups that can, come about in the country. So, in your opinion, why is there such an attitude existing? First of all, if there is any, broader reason, and secondly, how do you
Yeah.
think, the futures can change? How can, the online gaming industry flourish? What needs to happen?
So, first off, if you look at the nationwide situation, it's not as bad as people think, by the way. It's just Karnataka. So, even if you look at Karnataka's law, it's essentially someone, this is a joke we have internally to say that some intern somewhere went and read the Madras High Court judgment and just realized that let's just put skill based gaming to every line so that the Madras High Court judgment doesn't happen all
Okay.
over again. So when we look at the government, let's be Montesquieu about it and say that the judiciary is as much a part of the government as the legislature is. So
Okay.
when we say that, let's keep in mind that our very good judges have gone ahead and usually quashed most of these legislations, right? So we have a very good situation. So, and if you look at some of the regulations that are there in Sikkim and Goa, I wouldn't say they're regressive. I think they're
Right.
fairly okay. The one issue I have, being a gamer but not a gambler, right? And I don't say that in a negative connotation, is
Right.
that the terms are getting conflated. So there is another joke to say that, especially in Maharashtra, you'd find these tinted window places with which say something gaming, and as a kid I would say I
Right.
really want to go in, but then I wouldn't understand that it's actually gambling. So
Right.
but I like to game. I still like to game, right? So the deal is, the first thing is the conflation between gaming, video gaming, and gambling. That needs to be divided first off, right? So
Right.
the terminology in the market is to say real money gaming, which is not correct in my opinion, because if I don't think these people have played video games, because there's real money involved there as well. I don't know whether you're aware of the loot box situations
Yeah.
that happen across the globe, right? And Epic and Apple as well, the whole
Right.
shenanigans that are going
Right.
on there. So that's the first issue. I don't think most of these people understand the difference between the two. And the Dream 11 MPL, I mean, that's really sad if you ask me, because economy is economy. But in terms of where they're coming from, I would not bash the government outright.
Right.
I kind of know where they're coming from. So have you visited Karnataka at any point in time, or Bangalore?
I visited, my brother used to study in Manipal, so and I visited
Right,
Bangalore for 2 to 3 days for a
right.
competition. That's all.
Right. So it reached a situation here where you'd find almost every other auto rickshaw with, advertising for saying, a lot of these other shady brands, by the way. I'm not talking about, some of the bigger brands out there who actually have policies and safeguards, but there was this mushrooming of, gambling portals essentially, and it just didn't make sense. So it's like, in my opinion, liquor, right? And
Right.
and the two are usually put on the same level in terms of regulation. Completely ban, not really. I don't think that should be the case. But should be regulated properly? Absolutely. But
Right.
the key word there being regulation. So I really hope that this act, so to speak, kind of gets tempered down a little bit for the sake of these people. And full disclosure, I have no clients in the space. By the way, we
Right.
we we work with esports companies. We don't work
Right.
with uh, you know uh, real money gaming, like they call
Right.
themselves, those companies. But they can reach out to me though if they want some advice,
Right.
right?
Right. So,
Is that
and
advertising? It's not right.
so and what's also happening is that, uh, as you said, the government's coming from a certain point of view, but what happens is that
Yeah.
that carefulness just gets diluted or just gets
Hmm.
ignored when they're drafting these regulations or ordinances, you know because I
Yeah, it's
think,
really silly. Yeah,
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 there
yeah.
needs to be some kind of an assessment of the kind of words that are put into a statute or ordinance, because the effect then becomes that the entire thing is getting banned, and that pushes out these firms, and that
Yeah,
creates
but
a lot of
it's a really
care.
funny, but
Yeah.
it's a really funny thing, and this is, I was thinking about this. So, this original act came out in the 60s, right? So,
Right.
there are some provisions. I don't know if the audience wants to go through the act itself. So, there are provisions about gaming in public, right?
Right.
Which initially I found to be extremely funny, but then I realized almost, I mean, a lot of youths play PUBG like sitting on Activas,
Right.
lying around streets. Like, that used to be the case in Bombay, at least around Fort, right? So I was just thinking how some things don't change, so I can kind of see why they initially put that there.
Right.
Should they ban games like that though? Absolutely not. Yeah. And I found the whole PUBG thing as well very, very silly. I
Right.
don't personally play the game. I've tried playing it, not really my cup of tea, but I find it really silly. Yeah. I mean, it's
Right.
it's just a game. Games are nice. We
Right.
play games all the time. And the saddest part is we recognize sport, but we don't recognize some of these other games. It's the
Right.
same thing. You have rules you need to play to win. So as someone who likes playing sport, it's a game at the end of the
Right.
day, right? And by the way, most people who play games usually play traditional sports as well. And you have to ask yourself, why is that? You
Right.
just want to play, right? It's not.
And
Yeah,
with even with these, let's say, let's talk about these games which involve money or real money, or it can be, some form of
yeah,
digitalized money. Let's say Rummy, for example,
yeah,
or any such game. What has happened, I've been
yeah.
tracking this, and there have been many legislations. Of course, the high courts have, clamped these down. Some have been declared unconstitutional, things like that. But what has happened is that there's a confusion as to what needs to be done and what needs to be regulated, because the essential problem then becomes that people are getting addicted. They want to win all the time, and they're putting in that money. When they don't win, they're committing these serious acts. Someone's committing, for example, they're taking their own lives because they've lost so much money. So then there needs to be a choice. What needs to be regulated? You can't stop the game. Why not? My question then becomes, why not try to change that attitude, or that try to create some kind of a drive wherein people become aware that I can lose, and I can lose seriously.
That's a sign of a mature country, right? And
Right,
you're not just talking about one thing, right? I mean,
right,
everyone's been talking about this entire cruise ship fiasco that's been happening as well, right?
right,
If you look at addiction, because that's the same principle there, right? To say that you
right,
don't do it, it's illegal because it's possible addiction, there's harm, that may occur, etc. That's the worst way to tackle it. But we're touching upon very large policy,
right,
discussions here to say that you're basically looking at how patronizing should your government be, essentially,
right,
right? And you're right, you're absolutely right. So it's just like every other family, right? Every family
right,
has a different set of parents that control the family a different way. So
right,
you need to understand that our country, and this is something that I'm assuming you also come from an urban background. I
right,
come from a little bit of both. So I wouldn't say it's completely unnecessary. There's a huge
right,
section of our population that definitely needs some sort of guidance.
right,
But what you're saying, that's the absolute ideal. Like if we can reach a situation where you have mature individuals who are free to make the choices they want to make,
right,
while at the same time getting some degree of protection from the government, that's the most
right,
nominal situation essentially. I hope we get there. I don't know whether we can get there right now. And
right,
like I said, we're going to be touching on, alcohol and prohibited substances are very similar to it, right? It's usually the same kind of
right,
regulation. It's like alcohol. Some states in India don't allow for, the sale of alcohol,
right,
right? Some of them have regulation in a different sense. So it depends. It depends on, how you want to regulate it, how mature is your market. Are they good? Are they good things and bad things for both? There are. Absolutely.
right.
Yeah.
Absolutely agree on that. And I think that, as times change, maybe in future this can happen. And now let's just come
I really
back
hope. Yeah.
to, and this will be my last question. And I hope you
Sure.
can, uh, be very, honest, and, very as open about it as you can be. In your opinion, like, if I'm sure that a lot of viewers and a lot of young practitioners listening to this, episode, and they want to launch their own practice, but they don't know how to go about it. So, in your opinion, from your experience with working with these big organizations and now having your own firm, if you would want to give, some essential piece of advice, what would it be to these young practitioners who want to, or even, the professionals who have been there for 10, 15 years who want to now go independent? What would your advice be? What are the things that one should keep in mind? And in your opinion, how does one decide? I'm sure this is a factual situation which depends on one person to another, but how does one decide when it is the right time? What are the main factors that influence that choice?
Wow. Okay. So the first part of what you asked, I don't think very few people jump into independent practice right outside law school, right? So
Right,
I'm not the best person to comment on that because I didn't do that myself. So I'm going to say that I don't know what that's like. But are there benefits to working with established organizations first? Always, always, and it's a give and take, the people who've had really good relationships, who've been mentors to me, from all of these organizations, I'd help them any day, and it's not just professional courtesy, it's on a personal level. So I'd say try out stuff. There's nothing wrong with it. Professional
right,
relationships are not very dissimilar to normal relationships, right? There are some people who get into an arranged situation and be perfectly happy with it. That's I like to call those people, people who've just gotten placed out of college and they're really happy with the situation. And they're damn happy, right? So
right,
they've been in firms for 15, 20 years and it's like family to them, right? It's perfect, right? Some people want to play the field, kind of figure out, okay, what's happening here, what's happening there, and then eventually settle down. So you can see the analogies that
right,
can be drawn between these two situations. You can't give one piece of advice to everyone. It also
right,
depends on what economic background you're from. This does not get talked about a lot at all. So
right,
if you need cash and you need to establish yourself for 5 to 6 years, you need to work with an organization that will give you that security, right?
right,
Working independent it's hell in terms of the risk you're taking, in terms of paychecks that may not come in. Invoices don't get cleared, by the way. It's
Right.
extremely horrendous. So yeah, that also happens. So it's a lot of these things to keep in mind for sure.
Right.
In terms of when you go independent, let me tell you this. So every law school, I think the best resource in a law school is are your batchmates,
Right.
right? The best resources in a job or your workplace are usually your colleagues, right?
Right.
The same goes for being independent as well. So at some point, I remember having conversations with people very close to me, also within the legal fraternity, and just telling them this is nonsense, right? It's really hard to actually do what I want to do because there's no platform that's going to give me that
Right.
vehicle to do what I want to do, and the way I want to do it with the ethics that I want to do it with. And they said, yeah, okay, just do your own thing then. And back then it was, oh, should I? I mean, I'm barely, towards a decade. Like most people do it, 15, 20 years. They usually
Right.
like, bunch up with two, three other very senior partners from another place
Right.
and do it. And I was just thinking to myself, I said, yeah, why not? Because I've been doing stuff independently anyway,
Right.
right? And I think one should become partner in 8 to 9 years, no matter where, right?
Right.
I think you should be working a beep off until you can actually be partner at 8 to 9 years of PQ, because that's how it used to be 10 years ago. Things have not
Right.
changed. It's just that the market has become so much more saturated now that it
Right.
takes longer for you to just get promoted above, and designations like PA and what are some of the other ones? PA designate and SA
Yeah.
designate. I mean, it's just
Partner designate.
organizations throwing rungs at you to say that
Right.
it's just, yeah, yeah, organizations throwing rungs at you to say that this is what. In my mind, it was very old school to say that
Right.
associate, senior associate, partner,
Right.
not salary part, real partner. Like these are the three levels, and that's how a lot of foreign firms also work, right? So.
Right.
Uh, Listen, I'm not bashing the people who are within those frameworks. Let's just be very clear. It's just my own, way of doing things. I get bored in that situation. It's like giving you a
Right.
medal every year, right? So, no one wants that. So, you'll figure it out. So, just to loop back on my point, please keep a good circle of friends who can give you very unbiased, objective advice.
Right.
Mentors are really, really important. Some of the biggest assets ever. So, these people help you out for sure. So
Right.
it's not just your decision. You'll start realizing that it's a very symbiotic situation that's there, and if you want to take the leap, you will have at least 3 to 4 people at least backing you, to
Right.
say that, yeah, I fully support what's happening here. So, and that happens till this day, by the way. I think it takes a while for firms to get profitable,
Right.
um, and having that support is really, really important. So that'll help you in that situation, is
Right.
what I would say. Please listen to advice and mentors and colleagues and everyone else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, sir. I think that was a wonderful, that was quite honest and insightful at the same time. I know I said that that was the last question, but I just want to put you on a spot here. When is the next episode of Bridge Legal
Yeah,
Podcast
sure.
coming
Oh wow. Some of the downsides of not having what's the way I can put it? There's no remunerative incentive to do most of these things. So the problem is it keeps getting pushed back. And I'll tell you what happens. So the issue with the podcast, this is my own personal issue with this. So I end up, so there's a lot of research, then there's writing the script, then there's the recording, and then there's cutting out bits where I'm just laughing, or I'm coughing, or I'm just reading out
out?
stuff and it just doesn't sound right, and I'm just
Right.
talking to myself. So that takes a lot of time as well, by the way, that editing that happens. What's happening is that I keep writing down, topics and research notes, and I keep putting it into my pocket reading list, and that list has grown for 3 months and it's just getting worse. So the problem is that, and it's a good thing as well, by the way. So 5 years back, you didn't
Right.
have these many developments happening all the time, by the way. And
Right.
we come back to the whole generalization, specialization thing. I have to keep
Right.
tabs on, what's happening with IP, what's happening with fintech, what's happening with crypto and blockchain, what's happening on, the fun side of things.
Right.
Yeah, so it's just taking a lot of effort. I wanted to do it this weekend, but
Right.
the last weekend, but I'm hoping it gets done this weekend, but in a positive way. So this is one way to look at it. I don't flood people with a lot of
Right.
content. So if people say I don't have time for a podcast, man, it's taking me, I compress close to 400 500 pages within like 15 to 16 minutes, just so that you
Right.
get just what you need, and it's all for free. It's done with production qualities that You don't hear the dog barking or
Right.
the cat, meowing. I don't know is that what cats do? Anyway, so yeah, so it takes a lot of effort. I'm hoping it gets done by this week. We were
Right.
focusing on the NFT project essentially, which is also another pet project, right? That's also not like a
Right.
billable thing per se. So it will be out soon, and I actually pride myself over the fact that we don't have that many episodes. So I want people to
Right.
know that okay, this is how the episodes are changing. This is how the style is changing. There are not
Right.
that many episodes. It's not coming out every day or every week.
Right.
I don't need influencers. I don't need people following me. I don't need metrics. I don't need any of that jazz. So
Right.
I do it as an artist. So hopefully it's not as bad as GRR Martin. I hope you get episodes
Right.
of it. But yeah, this week is what I'm looking at. Yeah.
Well, looking forward to it then, sir. Thank you so much for joining in today. And it was very enjoyable. And I personally had a delight talking to you. Thank you so much.
It was